Alright, we have to start on time, and it says 1:35. So I wanted to welcome everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Scott Fortunoff, the president of Studioe Fabrics. I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to attend the Pepper Corey Studioe Schoolhouse on Big Stitch Quilting. So thank you very much, and a big thank you to Pepper for being the speaker and MC for us. She's been a godsend to Studioe, and we're so proud and happy to have her on our team. She is a guru and full of sage advice and wisdom, and I learn so much from her whenever we speak. So thank you, Pepper, for all you do for us. Before I hand over the mic, I wanted to point out that I have a Big Stitch Quilting on my jacket. So I must be in vogue, because Pepper is in vogue with the quilting. So without any further ado, here is Pepper. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this schoolhouse. We know that you have a huge variety of choices for Schoolhouse, so thank you for choosing us today. This schoolhouse is a real schoolhouse. This is not just about, here are the new fabrics, buy, 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 buy. This is about learn about something that we hope will be useful to you in the future. I'd like to, though, besides Scott Fortunoff, who's here, introduce a few other people whose names you might want to know if you deal with Studioe Fabrics. The woman in the headset over there is Vanessa Dennison, who is our marketing guru and is committing all of this to film. Okay, so just in case you decided to do anything strange, Vanessa might be able to actually film you. In the back, Cliff, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Cliff Garfinkel. I'm sales manager of Studioe and Quilting. And we're happy to be on board with the JAVTech group and happy to be associated with yourself.
That's great. And there's Greg Fortunoff in the corner, and Mark Octavio, who just switched places. Okay, and Scott, that you were introduced. And over here is Mr. Fortunoff, Robert. And the lady in the blue, who probably handed you your kit when you came in, is Megan Downer, who is the art director for this company. Without which, when I submit ideas for fabrics, none of it would ever become real without Megan's eye and expertise. I'm very pleased at the attendance today, so I figured that Big Stitch Quilting is what's caught your eye. A few nods, maybe. So how many people already teach Big Stitch Quilting in their store? A few. So I presume the rest of you are interested. Is that right? Okay, so what is Big Stitch Quilting and how does it relate to the fabrics that this company sells? Well, my special love are the peppered cottons, which are the shot cottons. And they're composed of two colors, one in the warp and one in the weft. And that can make for some unusual colors, to say the least. Like when you blend royal blue with orange, you get a color called raisin, which is an iridescent brown, of all things. So we have the peppered cottons color chart, which was given to you. So there are 50 colors in that line. If you're going to use a solid color fabric, or something that is almost solid like this, why not make your stitching show? The wonderful thing is that Big Stitch is a hand skill that is now being added to the repertoire of all other skills, not in place of machine skills. By the way, Sunday morning from 8 to 9:30, I'm doing a take and teach called Hand Quilting 101, Everything You Ought to Know About the Subject. And there are about 4 places left in the class. And we're going to address regular quilting and Big Stitch quilting and how to combine both of those with machine quilting and with long arm quilting. And a huge goodie bag, better than you've seen in a long time. So if you really like to get up on hand quilting, there's still room in that seminar, okay? You also got in your handout, you got a sample of a peppered cotton, and you got a pack of Big Stitch needles. If you're going to do big stitches and use a thicker thread, you have to use a different sort of needle. If you try to thread a regular quilting between with a pearl cotton, you're going to end up with things starting to untwist and you'll get very, very frustrated. So take a look at the needles in that pack sometime and look at the eyes of them. The eyes of them are not just small round holes, which is for what most hand sewing needles have. Instead, they're all oval or what they call egg eye, which is a small rounded oval. These are meant for thicker threads. The Big Stitch quilting pack is composed of embroidery needles, chenille needles, and several of the larger sizes of betweens that you rarely see, like 3 and 4. So whatever works for the project at hand. The one thing I would caution you about, if you're looking at your stock of needles and you want to try Big Stitch and it says embroidery on the package, make very sure it's not a tapestry embroidery, but a crewel embroidery. A tapestry embroidery needle is slightly blunted on the end and is for canvas work. So you will simply be frustrated. You'll be poking it in and out of the fabric and making enormous holes. Make sure your embroidery needle is crewel. C-R-E-W-E-L, okay? Now, the people in England who package those needles hate us because they are from a different variety of needles, betweens, embroidery, chenilles, and they're all put together in one pack. So they have a really hard time when they package it for us. And then it's not so hard because they've been selling well. We hope that if you take up Big Stitch quilting, that you will be able to supply your students, your customers, with the right kinds of products. Now, I'm willing also to take questions at any time. So if some occur to you and it's pertinent, go ahead and raise your hand at the time. I'm not going to wait till the end. So is there anybody who has a burning desire to have a question about Big Stitch answered now? Because I'm quite willing to address it. No, you guys just wanted to get off your feet. Anyway, you were, yes, what?
We're anxious to get to it.
You're anxious to get to it, that's nice. I have a really hard job at this quilt market. Aside from giving 2 schoolhouses and 1 take and teach, I get to sit and stitch and talk to people. It's really hard. Let's take a look at some of the samples that are up here so you can see how you might combine Big Stitch quilting with machine quilting. Now, that used to be a no-no. People would say, if you quilt a quilt, it all should be in one technique or the other. Nowadays, if you look at the different quilt shows and their categories, although they will reward machine work and they will reward handwork, they're no longer saying, you can't mix the two. So happily mix the two. This is a small quilt that I made with the help of my long-arm friend. And she machine quilted all of the straight seams for me. What a boon that was. So within a couple of hours, my long-arm friend had machine quilted these vertical and horizontal seams and also the patchwork blocks, leaving me to have the fun of doing Big Stitch. So for those of you who provide long-arm services or sell long-arm machines, you should not ever be afraid of the hand worker. All she wants to do is sit down and stitch. So if you can help her get to that nirvana, you know, I don't have the t-shirt yet, but I'm going to. I hand quilt so I don't kill you. Okay? That's what she wants to do. She doesn't want to do the straight up and down stitches that don't show. And this is where there's a wonderful intersection between machine and handwork that's happening now. It is no longer hand versus machine. It is all of us together are needed in the quilting craft. So this is a scrap quilt. My friend Laura Gilvin, who is someplace, Laura, and I forgot to introduce her. Laura is the person that supplies me with fabric and calms me down. Laura is marketing for Studioe Fabrics. And she sent me all these wonderful scraps. And I put them together with peppered cottons here and here. And then sat down and just zenned right out. Had a great time doing it. Great time. Is Big Stitch related to the Japanese craft sashiko? Yes, it is. However, it is the American version of that. Most sashiko is actually done through one layer of fabric. And if there are layers within the sashiko, it's usually layers of fabric, not batting. Big Stitch is true quilting. It goes through a top, a batting, and a backing. This is in the sashiko style. And this was a pillow that I made for the Annie's hand quilting video in the sashiko style. Again, with Studioe fabrics, peppered cottons, and a line that Megan Downer did, and a little bit from Town and Country here. Let's look at some smaller pieces. Now, Laura, you made these smaller ones?
Just the people in our office did.
Oh, okay. Would you like to talk about them? I'll hold them for you. Oh, the back is so cute. You've got to see the back. Isn't that nice? With multiple colors.
So this one is just made with scraps, let's turn it this way, from the Garden Party collection. And it's just the basic friendship star with big stitch going through some of the seams.
What type of batting was used in this? It's very
just
flat.
like a cotton,
Okay.
plain cotton, thin batting.
Okay.
So.
Question, do you have to baste it first, or pin based, or?
Any kind of quilting that you're going to handle needs some reinforcement. So when I did the conjunction with the long arm quilter, yes, it was great. She did the machine quilting, and then she increased the size of the stitch, and she machine basted in an X across the blocks I wanted to hand quilt. I was just in heaven. I got it back and I was ready to go.
So pin basting for that would be.
I mean, we even had the binding put on. I don't know if that's a no-no or not.
Nope,
but
nope.
Then we like big stitched after that. And this is all around town collection with just peppered cottons and big stitches to highlight it.
This particular shade of peppered cotton is a pink plus a gray. And so it's sort of, it's friendly with all grays. It's friendly with all pinks. And what's this one?
So this is one of Studioe's free projects with the ABC,
ABC Safari.
ABC Safari.
Diane Eichler.
And I just thought it'd be really, really fun to big stitch around just
Look
the
at that.
animals. I mean, didn't take hardly any time at all, but it was a lot of fun to do. So.
One thing about big stitch quilting is choose contrasting color thread. Unlike traditional quilting, in which you most often match the color of the thread to the background you're quilting on, this is in-your-face stitches. You know, so you want to find a contrasting color to make these things really pop.
We have a question.
What size thread do you use?
I use number 8 pearl most of the time. You can use number 12. You could double regular quilting thread, but I believe number 8 is
Yeah, that's
the
fine.
best one for the job.
Why?
Hmm?
Why is that?
Because you can see it. And it operates very nicely within the chenille and the larger embroidery needles.
This is Diary of a Geisha collection with peppered cottons, and then just a single quilt block on the front with some big stitch just to highlight it a little bit.
How do you decide how big the stitch is going to be?
There is no one particular standard. It's like sashiko. You have to adapt the stitches to the project. Okay? So that's another very way it differs than traditional quilting, where depending on how long you've been quilting, or if you've met the quilt police, whom I am determined to assassinate, you were probably told by someone, try to get as many stitches as possible on your needle to produce small stitches. But I think that you need to gauge it to the project. This is perfect for this wide sashing and the contrasting thread. It works very, very well there. Over here, more in the imitation of the classic Japanese sashiko, slightly smaller stitches,
But still distinct in the front.
but still distinct. Whenever you're doing big stitch or sashiko, you need to mind the gap, just like the British thing says on the railway station. Mind the gap. The gaps are what make the stitches look good. So we can really see that white against that indigo in a project like this. Speaking of indigo, this is a log cabin variation in a line called Kyoto Blue. And I just sat down and stitched. I just zenned out. Some of it was done as sashiko before the top was sandwiched. Others was done as big stitch afterwards. And again, my friendly long arm quilter did a lot of machine stitching in a pale gray thread that you hardly notice, which made all the layers lay down nice and flat for me so that I could have fun stitching it. Plus, the peppered cottons are used in the binding and a couple of places within this, within the piecing. That is a blue box. I don't know where people get the zippy titles. That's a blue box. Now this is this looks like a number 12 pearl. Okay, this looks like a little thinner. So this is a more delicate look. Still large stitches, but daintier. What is the line?
Meadowlark.
Meadowlark, okay. Plus peppered cottons, which I'm happy to say are becoming the go-to solid. I'm just delighted with that. You know, if you want to match something, you can find something blendy in those 50 colors. Yes?
Do you use a hoop or anything whenever you're stitching?
It depends on where I'm doing the stitching. If I'm near the edge of the quilt, if it's well basted, I usually don't use a hoop. But if I'm towards the center, a hoop is very helpful. It's a good question. Let's see, I want to make sure I get in some things here. Okay. This appeared in a magazine, Fresh Quilts. Formerly, there was machine quilting here, and I've been taking it out and replacing it with Big Stitch. Cannot let well enough alone. Okay? So I do like the background. I really like the machine stitching here, the rising bubbles. I like that quite a lot. But I'm taking this out and I'm redoing it in white Big Stitch. And I'm happy as a lark when I'm doing this. This was Fresh Quilts, I think the March or April issue. Yes?
One's not out.
I know, so you can
Where
see.
it is, it looks
All right.
much better.
That's what the block looked like formerly. Okay? There was stitching, but you couldn't see it. It was in dark red machine thread, and there was no extra leaf here. So if we go over here, this is where I've taken out the machine stitching. I'm replacing it and doing what's called ghost quilting. Ghost quilting is when you take an applique motif and you repeat it in just stitching. So I'm having lots of fun doing that. Yes? Do I mark? Well, actually, I made a small paper template for this. Yes, that far I did. I didn't need to mark this because when I took out the machine stitching, it left this lovely little trail of holes. But I do a lot of quilt marking. I also design quilting stencils. But I think some things are simply obvious. Some things you can just follow a seam, and you don't need to mark. That's a good question. Yes?
Marking tool. What do you? I've been following since I took your class years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm always looking for the perfect marking tool for it. What do you use?
Well, first of all, there is not one. Okay? All right, it depends on the color fabric that you want your quilting to show on.
Right.
Okay, but you should have in your quilt marking pack a white pencil, a silver pencil, an erasable water marker that's in a bright turquoise blue. You should have a hera, which is a small Japanese tool that you can lay down and mark straight lines with. And you should have a good quality old-fashioned lead pencil. And one of those fabric erasers that is labeled fabric eraser. Now I can get 90% of my marking done with those tools. You know.
Thank you.
Good question. Yes?
So combining the pepper cottons with a regular printed piece of goods, any problems?
No problems. When we did this line of shot cottons, we wanted it to be of a comparable weight to regular quilting cottons. If it's too thin, especially experienced quilters will not feel at home mixing it. But I have been mixing it from the onset and feeling very happy about that. Okay. The question was, what about mixing peppered cottons? I am all about mixing everything. Lines of cottons, ages of things, things from my stash. You know, I made this little quilt. This is not Big Stitch. This is traditional hand quilting. Do not measure the stitches per inch. I think it depends on the phases of the moon as to how good my stitches are. I'd like Laura to help me there. And Majority of these are Studioe fabrics, little twinkly prints, but from different lines. And there's only one that's not a Studioe fabric, and it's that plaid, which was a shirt. And I ripped it up and used it because it did a good job. It was a purple and green plaid. I mean, come on. Now, of course, we do have peppered plaids, but at the time when I made this last January, those were still on the drawing board. So I took a look at this shirt and thought, bye-bye, honey, and ripped it up. And I had lots of fun making this quilt. These are the traditional small stitches. When I do any sort of hand quilting, whether it is traditional hand quilting or big stitch quilting, I like to use a soft quilt batting. Not a cotton quilt batting that has a sticky or stiff surface. Those are great for long-arm quilters, but not for handwork people. If you're going to work by hand, work soft, so that it's a pleasure to quilt, and you're not standing there with a pair of pliers trying to pull the needle through. Let me see. I can just talk for a long period of time. Oh, how about the plaids? Yes. Working on that made me realize that, oh, I love the plaids, and I wanted to work with plaids. And this is what they came up with. And they are just, I think they're luscious, and they're the same weight as the peppered cottons, and they just feel so good when you work with them. And there's smaller checks, and then there's these narrow stripes. And from time to time, I have new favorites. This ensemble here is called Aquarium. And then there was the earth tones plus the taupes, and then the granite, which was all the black and whites and grays. And over here was the pink and purple haze. Does that tell you how old I am, that I name a fabric thing Purple Haze? And these lovely blues, very moody, lovely blues. Am I very concerned about matching plaids? No. When would I be concerned if I made my husband a pair of golf pants and there was a seam right up the back? Then I would match plaids. Otherwise, I'm perfectly content to think of these as simply linear prints. I do like to pre-wash my fabric, but when you do a lot of handwork, you will find that lots of new fabric has different sorts of finishes on it. And if you're handling it quite a bit, your skin can get dry. And I also don't want any surprises. So I will buy a new fabric, whatever the brand, whatever the maker or manufacturer. It'll stay on a shelf until I know I'm going to use some of it. And then I go up and I rip off half a yard and throw it in the washer. I don't wash and dry and iron and place all of those things together on the shelf. I have a sister-in-law who does all of that. I say that she's OCD. And she says, no, I'm CDO. I said, what does that mean? And she said, that's OCD arranged properly in alphabetical order. So, I wash it just before I use it. Yeah.
Are any of these offered pre-cuts?
I think, yeah, we did have some, we still have some quarter
The
yard.
solids.
Yes, the solids.
We have a neutral color combination and a bright.
Yes.
10 pieces in each group. And you get a box of 8, which would be 4 of the brights and 4 of the neutrals.
Are you going to do the class?
We don't have any plans to right now.
Okay. Okay. Are we about ready for the door prize thing? You guys, these are beautiful. We have 5 to award. If you have put your business card in a basket back there, and if you got the handout when you came in, you are eligible for a door prize.